Welcome to the Cyber Call, the podcast by Reactive for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together.
All right, welcome. I am also putting that in chat. See Mike out there already. Happy Monday to you all. It is March. That is unbelievable. March. Can I say that again? March 2026. We are almost one quarter into this year, and it is flying. So as folks come in, I like to always start off with a little bit of banter before we get into today's subject, introduce today's guests, et cetera, et cetera. The thing I wanted to kind of ask our folks here on the cyber call and you all out there is, not only just this announcement that the Pentagon is basically said, hey, Anthropic's out and any type of dealing with, the Department of Defense and OpenAI is in. That's one thing. And I'd like your thoughts on that. But before I get those, I would like to share, just a few other things that anecdotally, when you look at what the UN, this comes from the Army and their documentation, but it basically goes to say, about how AI will be used, why it's important its importance in the military. And there's some other things that I have, but in the interest of time, I won't pull those up. So let me just stop sharing just for a moment. And Brian, I'm going to just start with you a little bit here to riff. I mean, you're highly credentialed in CMMC and things of that nature. When you listen to really, really smart people from a macroeconomic standpoint and also understand military AI, they say is, we're in an AI, it used to be the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And the Cold War there and, who had the most, military might. And now we're in this, almost this, world of who's going to have the most AI might because of its implications on what it can do for military and decision making and things like that. Just anecdotally, your thoughts on the importance of AI for militaries like the U.S. and obviously others. And a bigger piece I'll riff on that I brought up at Right of Boom is I think there's a huge opportunity for MSPs in the energy sector. I think we are going to be needing to catch up drastically. I think nuclear is going to be a big, and this is not me, this is my reading on the subject. All sorts of energy is going to be needed, way more than we ever thought possible for compute. So, Brian, your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, I think when we think about AI, we're already behind, right? And so the challenge here is how do we embrace AI but balance it with some of the ethical and moral and other concerns, right? It'd be draconian to think, well, we have to do AI, we have to move slow, and we have to at the same time have all these controls and laws and regulations and rules in place. We will get buried. Right, other countries don't have the red tape and some of the other friction that we have, and they move much faster. Right, so this AI and fill in the blank. I mean, look at drone technology now. I mean, drones is in every single conversation now when it comes to military strikes. So I think that the biggest challenge for the U.S. is going to be striking the right balance between velocity and having the right controls that it doesn't freak out most of the U.S. population. What I'm already seeing now too in the FedRAMP and the CMMC space is just confusion, right? It's like there's these executive announcements, hey, Anthropic's high risk, you can't use it. And then it's like, well, okay, there's CMMC assessments, FedRAMP authorizations going on right now where and AI is one of those, like Anthropic is one of those things that you don't really get a FedRAMP ATO kind of thing for because it's used in an AWS and GCP type of an environment. So it's a weird time from a compliance perspective, but going up to 100,000 feet, the balance of velocity with the ethical and moral and other concerns, I think, is what you're starting to see a little bit of friction come in, and the government taking a stance, and then Anthropic and now OpenAI, kind of how are they fitting in? Are they going to pinky promise that the government won't use it for this or that? And would they tell us if they are? And so those are the things that are kind of top of mind.
So Kelvin, that's really good, Brian. Kelvin, over to you, because, again, in the U.S., we see things, through our lens, and someone that's, I would say, much more worldly like yourself. And no offense, right? I mean, meaning you, just based on your business, you're in you get to travel many different regions, you get to see and talk to many different cultures. How do you see this?
I really agree with what Brian said at the start. We're already behind on AI, and that's not a we as in we as a country or as a region. We as humanity are behind on AI because everything is accelerating so much that no one is able to catch up to exactly everything that we're doing right now. A good example of that is OpenClaw. I set up my OpenClaw bot a while ago. We're using it for our business in our Discord, and the immense power that a tool like that has is something that most people are not ready for. And I think that Anthropic, not looking through a political lens, but just them saying, like, we don't want to break these safeguards because we're worried about the effects of it, is actually a good thing because it slows down the speed of evolution that we've been going through lately. And slowing down that speed might be what we need to be able to catch up. If I right now go to my brother's kid and I tell him, like, hey, you can make an AI do this, this, and that, he will tell me, oh, no, I've already figured it out. I've done it on my phone. If I go to my brother, who is, of course, like he's 10 years older than me, and if I tell him, hey, AI can do this, this, and that, and he's like, no, you're lying. You're imagining things. So that gap is huge. And I think that Anthropic saying to the US government, we don't want to remove these safeguards, and whatever their reasons are, them saying we don't want to remove these safeguards right now is actually a good thing for slowing down the evolution of the tech as a whole. And yeah, each region, each place has different structures in place. Like looking at Europe, we're way behind on AI. We're the only European AI that actually exists is Mistral, which is, I believe it's French, but it might be Swedish. I'm not entirely sure there. But like Brian said, it's the entire idea of AI inside of the government is something that we still have to find terms with, I think, everywhere, worldwide.
Interesting. A good appreciate that perspective. Phyllis, over to you, who, sat at the NSA for 25 years. If you were there, what would, again, obviously there's so much, things you can't talk about, but, through that lens of, working in tandem with, kinetic war, right? You guys did and things like that. What's your take on this?
I think it's very important to, first off, I agree with what everyone's saying, is really to think about what authority does what organization have, right? So like at the NSA, we spent millions upon millions of dollars to make sure we didn't spy on US citizens because that's illegal. And so I think what's interesting is, you also have to look at the legality of it. Here in the US, as you see the rise of privacy law by the states, because there is no overarching federal privacy kind of statute or law, you'll see that more and more there is this growing expectation of privacy. And then here, we personally, none of us know exactly what the negotiations were, but when you look in the article, it's like one of the big things was gathering data on U.S. citizens. And quite honestly, in order to do that, you typically need a judge, right? And so, what's interesting is what is the legality of all this? And I think another interesting thing is, they're working together, and literally at 4:59 they can work together, but at 5 p.m. there's supply chain risks. So, the decision making and all these things are just very interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But, from my perspective, I think we do need to look at authority. We need to look at the laws, and we have to understand, what should our expectation of privacy be? I think we have pretty high expectations.
Fair.
And so, Kelvin said, are we going to allow the government to do whatever,
whatever the hell they want? I'll say it, fellas.
I mean, it's an interesting times.
Yeah. You wonder though, I'm just making a comment. Let's not go down this rabbit hole, but you mentioned privacy, I mean, we all know our phones are listening. I mean, and tracking, doing,
Yep.
I mean, you think something, and all of a sudden, it's you go to your computer and it's right there, and
the ad's right there. Yep.
You speak about something and it's in your browser. I mean, so again, privacy is an interesting thing. But Bob, the last comment or a question I have for you, especially
Sure.
being in an area of energy, being in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Most of the really smart macroeconomic people I listen to and subscribe to believe the energy requirements for AI, for compute, like we have so underestimated what we're going to need that. And by the way, when these really, really smart people look at China as an example and the velocity in which they are building out their nuclear capabilities. And when I say this is not like nuclear war capabilities.
No.
Nuclear facilities to power large scale compute. I see for MSPs and supply chain, man, if I was thinking about where I want to start where could a frontier be that we're not thinking about? Who are we're all thinking about supply chains to the DIB right now if we're in that space. But manufacturing for a long time has been on the decline in the US, and for nuclear, and maybe for short term, it's going to be natural gas because it can come online so much quicker. But are you seeing anything? I'm just curious in your region, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we just got notified, state news here that we had another data center that's decided to locate in Louisiana. So that's, that puts us with a Microsoft data center in one part of the state and a Meta data center in another part of the state. And Amazon's looking at putting another one in the state of Louisiana. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but to your point, if I were going to say what some of the biggest technological gains that the human race is going to get out of this AI technology development, it's going to be power. Because to your point, we are already talking about kilowatt per token. I mean, literally, that's a term now, right? I mean, they're starting to talk. There will be. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there on the commodities market. At some point, kilowatt per token is going to show up as a commodity. You just write it down on a piece of paper that your Uncle Bob said that, because it's going to happen. Sure, it's worth sitting there.
Put that in the Poly market and bet on it now, Bob.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's going to happen, right? But there's a lot of technology that's been developed on that nuclear front that's not. I mean, everybody thinks nuclear. They think the old big towers that can melt down and kill everybody. That's not where the development's been happening. They're using these small regional soft water reactors that are. They're not in the danger. They're not nearly in the size and scope of danger that you would have from traditional old school nuclear. And you have to power these these monsters. And everybody keeps thinking, I mean, again, we keep saying all the jobs are going to get taken. AI is going to take everything. Well, you know what? You got to have data centers that run it. And you got to have power to power those things, all of which are infrastructure that we are right now. We're writing checks that our power grid can't cash.
Yeah.
Right now. That's what we're doing. Right. And so we're selling companies down the river without the infrastructure to support the operations to actually realize all of that. So we are, to Kelvin's and Brian's and everybody else's point, we are so far out ahead of that we're creating risk for our organizations by, trying to map ourselves to a future when it's a non-deterministic future as it stands right now. And by the way, I could talk a long time about that Anthropic deal, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to make about half the United States mad if I start talking about it. No matter which way I go, I'm going to make half of the population mad one way or another. But I would say, as a human being, just put it in ChatGPT. Why'd the government dump Anthropic? And you'll get the material you need to kind of see that a lot of that had to do with those guardrails. Yeah. And what Anthropic was unwilling from a culture of a company standpoint to back off on. Yeah. Right. And to Phyllis's point, why you're a good steward one day and an enemy of the state the next day is more of a person's perception than the reality of what's really going on. That's all I'll say. I'll stay out of trouble.
I'm going to close this comment, but I like your point about cashing checks, for the energy that we don't have it. Can you imagine in the early 2000s if we were selling this idea of e-commerce and business at scale on the internet, but we didn't have the infrastructure and bandwidth to do it?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing right now. And we're acting like it's going to be okay.
That was my poor attempt.
Yeah, exactly.
Buddy, it only took us about 15 years and a .com bust to get there, but we finally made it. All right, so let's get into today. So we got some really exciting news to talk about, and that is our very own Brian Blakely working his what. Let me just put this up, but let me know if you can see this. All right, so and I'll put this in chat for everybody. Brian and I had a thesis, but we started testing it out. And the thesis, not only in business, but in university, is there's this immense gap, right, between technical speak and communication and what businesses care about. We put the test actually to the dean of a very large AI, cyber, and computing college, and we asked him that and said, "Hey, look, over the years you've taught thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They're very smart technically in cyber, and I'm just curious, do they have any type of skill, class, internships where they're working with what executives care about, financial statements, how they look at risk, budgeting, on and on and on?" Survey says not one. So you start to sit there and wonder, right? Obviously sarcastically, why, as certainly security leaders, but why as MSPs are security budgets being under or unfunded? Well, there's this massive communication gap. One group speaks one language, one speaks another language. And oh, by the way, one of the things I'm going to be working into this upcoming workshop with Brian is the work by Matthew Dixon, who was with Brent Adamson on the Challenger sale, who wrote The Jolt Effect. And as MSPs, right, we want to get people off the status quo, right, is not, you can't stay status quo, right? Kelvin, if you don't have MFA enabled, if you're missing these controls, if I see this risk, and we've agreed that's a concern, right? Even though I get the executive to agree, the research shows that business leaders are stalling on making decisions, and we've been all taught to, keep hammering. Gosh, if you don't do something, it'll here's all the risk. And what the research shows is by continuing down that path, you actually confirm for them their inability or their unwillingness to make a decision, because human beings would rather not make a decision than make a wrong decision or a bad decision. So there is a lot of psychology to this. And this course, I'm really proud of everything you've been able to do, Brian, and bring this. And lastly, as I intro you, most people know you, but my favorite saying that you one of the many that you do, and this is kind of like, to me, the hallmark of this workshop is when you have an interaction as a vCISO, right? You're this MSP and you've got this great, you've seen all this risk and you're saying all these things and you feel so compelled about what you're seeing. And the person says, the executive says to you, "You've given me a lot to think about, Brian." Yeah.
Kiss of death, right?
What's the translation, Brian?
Well, the translation is, I didn't understand an effing word you just said. And when I don't know anything that you're talking about weaknesses I don't understand and systems I've never heard of, and you're asking me to spend money and introduce friction into my business. Yeah. That's all I heard, right? And when I'm polarized and I don't know what to do, to your point a second ago, Andrew, I don't do anything, right? Or I take the money I have and I spend it somewhere else, right? And so that's the
So real quick, Brian, I think everybody knows you, but just in case someone's tuning in for the first time, listening to this on the podcast, just real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Kelvin.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Andrew, thanks again for having me back. A huge part of my mission, as you know, at CISO at Bellini Capital is simple, but it's not going to be easy. This certification program and some of the stuff we're doing is kind of the first, well, it's not the first step, right? First step is admitting we have a problem, right? So we're on step 2. I think I got that right, Bob. And then, so to help, on a mission to help create leaders who can earn trust and lead at the executive level, right? Not demand it, not assume it, but help earn it through credibility, right? We earn it by translating, Andrew, like you were saying a second ago, these technical security risks into business risk, into operational impact, financial exposure, strategic consequences. Because if we can't do that, the problem we have is we're not going to get budget. We're not going to get headcount. We're not going to get CapEx, OpEx in our programs that we built that are needed, that have things like MFA and other things. They're going to stall, right? They're going to fizzle out. And I've lived that. I've been the security leader who walked out of a boardroom thinking that didn't land, right? I spoke Klingon. Nobody understood anything I said. And I've over-explained. I've misread rooms. I pushed too hard in the wrong direction. And I learned something critical. The biggest vulnerability in most businesses is this leadership gap, right? We can't align with the business and the executive's priorities. We can't get the consensus. We can't communicate risk in a way the business can consume it and digest it and react to it. Money flows, like I said, somewhere else. And when money flows somewhere else and something goes boom, right? You hear all the CISOs whine, oh, I couldn't get money. The security's underfunded, and the reality is misaligned, right? And so I made it my mission to take everything I've learned, the wins, the mistakes, the tension, the executive friction, and compress it into a framework that helps security leaders get stakeholders to listen in, to lean in, to listen, to understand and resource what matters. Because when we need to build processes, when we need to change behavior, when we need to hire people, when we need to buy tools, those are business decisions, not technical ones. We want to influence, we have to lead at that level. So excited to dig in.
Thanks so much.
Today,
yeah, Kelvin, look, it's evident, by the way, if you have your hands on the pulse, which we're fortunate to, non-recurring revenue coming, is finally starting to come, like out of COVID, we know, right? Security controls and implementations and went through the roof. It was a combination of work from home and a combination of cyber insurance. But now NRR has rolled over And, to me, this is we'll know we start to get this right when we see NOR start to come back the other way. What are your thoughts? And let me hand it over to you.
Oh, that's a good question, because I believe that anything that we do as MSPs can be repackaged as a managed service. So I believe that everything should be recurring revenue always. It's just a matter of how inventive you are and how creative. But yeah, I first off, I love that you're here, Brian, because there's like a million questions that I have about this. Especially because I was just listening to you talk, and there's so many cool sound bites that you can just pick out of the things that you say. The part about not speaking Klingon to your clients, for example, is always wonderful. You've built this entire workshop around the idea that security leaders are somewhere stuck in between struggling and failing, not because of bad technology, but mostly because of bad communications. What's the moment in your own career when you felt like that you bumped into that it really smacked you down for a second?
I'll be a little bit vulnerable here since we're talking about vulnerable leadership, but a long time ago, this is classic, right? You are the CISO or vCISO, and you're invited into the board meeting to do like a State of the Union, right? So I had my deck all ready to go, right? And they told me I get 20 minutes to talk to the board about the CISO State of the Union kind of thing. So I got my deck, I got my heat maps, I got my spider diagrams, and I am ready to go. I think everything is tight and ready to go. I'm ready to do my 20 minutes. I get to the meeting and everybody's going and doing their thing. And I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, it's coming down to the last 5 minutes of the meeting, right? And so it comes over to me, and everybody's already kind of getting up and getting coffee and talking to each other. I'm into a Zoom, and you've got some other people in a Zoom and other people in a room. And I get my 20 minutes turns into 2 minutes, and I try to pack way too much, and I'm talking a bunch of technical jargon and TLAs, right? A bunch of 3-letter acronyms. And I think, okay, I did pretty good. I did as good as I could to consolidate my message. And what do I hear as I can hear the 2 board members talking over the Zoom? They probably didn't know the mic was still there. I never understand what the hell these cyber guys are talking about.
Oh, that is a painful one.
And I'm like, so you do some soul searching, right? It's not their fault, right? It's incumbent upon us to take these things that they don't really understand, right? They understand numbers and operations and that kind of thing. But I really did some soul searching and said, what do I need to do? So you go back to them and you say, hey, I know that didn't land. How do you want to consume information? What's the best way that I can communicate? What's important to you, right? Have some empathy, because these guys and gals are pulled a million different directions. And we go in oftentimes with a title or you think you have some influence, and you go in guns blazing thinking you are the headline. And man, you are not the story. You are one tiny little input to their risk or into their whole decision tree and other obligations and risks. So I think as soon as you come into it with that empathy and you start to connect the dots to what's important to the goals and objectives of the business and the board personally, what are their strategic goals? And then you come in and then you can take all this technical stuff. And that's a lot of what we talk about in the 3 days, right? Is to start to understand how to shift your mind to think more in business outcomes and business impact and less in technical vulnerabilities and technical jargon and control frameworks and stuff.
Perfect. That actually leads me straight into my second question, which is it's such a smooth segue. The workshop has a lot of common causes of security program failures. Out of the VCO, CISOs, and CISOs, which one on your list do you see the most, and what do you think security leaders are least willing to admit? And I understand it's probably going to be related to how people communicate, but yeah.
Well, if I look at the different models of CISO, vCISO is one of those I think has some of the biggest opportunity, but it's set up structurally for failure, just like vCIO, may it rest in peace. right? vCISO is set up where you have an MSP, especially a vCISO at an MSP. If you think about it, it is structurally set up for failure. And what I mean by that is a vCISO at an MSP, right? What they're doing is they have to lead 100% with influence. Okay. What's happened is they have risen the security practitioner ranks. They're pretty good at security. They can do a PowerPoint. And so what happens is they get the vCISO role and they get inserted and the program gets no traction. It does if they do sell it, and there's too much information out there right now for vCISOs about add a 7-figure, service line to your MSP this year. Here's a 1-page go-to-market strategy and all this without understanding what the vCISO role is. It's not a service, it's an executive leadership function. Okay. So vCISO comes in there, you've got an MSP, they elevated a security practitioner, and now they have no organizational chart power, they have no political power. They have to build a program and operationalize that program within their client and change behavior and change culture and add friction and controls and get budget. And that's a tough call. So what the problem here is the vCISO has to be one of the strongest influential leaders on the planet, and they lack the most credibility. The vCISO, a lot of the vCISOs are interpreted by the client, and I've talked to a lot of clients that have had vCISOs. It's interpreted a couple of bad ways, right? Where the vCISO is looked at really as a glorified, or maybe not glorified, technical account manager role, right? They come in and they talk about patch counts and a bunch of stuff the client doesn't understand. The client stops showing up for meetings, right? That's not a scheduling problem. That's a credibility problem, right? Your clients aren't showing up for those meetings for those reasons. And they're seen as, hey, every time I see my vCISO, she's always telling me I need to spend money on something they do. All roads lead to their black box 9,000 they want to put on my network, right? And so now it's a credibility killer, right? And that's where I think the vCISO struggles the most. They're probably the least likely to admit it, as I think about it, because the vCISO has to create authority without positional power. A traditional CISO at least has a title and a reporting structure. And even then, you have to lead a lot with influence. The org chart people don't report to you, right? So you've got to lead across the business lines with influence, and influence only works when communication is right, sharp and strategic and disciplined. And a lot of vCISOs are still operating like a senior engineer with a slide deck, right? And that model is not going to scale, and it doesn't build executive trust. And Kelvin, I agree with you when you started sharing a little bit about everything should be recurring revenue and some of that. But the other part of this is MSPs are challenged when it comes to selling consulting and advisory type of services. They're not a SKU, right? It's a much different selling process. It's just a different kind of beast than $2 per user per month, right? And so it very much a recurring role, but it's got its challenges.
I know, and there's a question, but I just want to get mine in first before I forget. You focus mostly on vCISOs. Do you believe that fractional CISOs struggle from the same issue?
Good question. Similar issue, but fractional CISOs are more, from my experience, blended in with the organization. Oftentimes, fractional CISOs are interim CISOs, or it's a company that is on the fence, right? Do we need a full-time CISO? Don't we? So it's like more of a contractual role, whereas the vCISO is very much more arm's length consultant, a little bit more disconnected from the day-to-day. A fractional CISO might even have people in the org, a security engineer, a director of InfoSec, or somebody reporting to them, whereas a vCISO is usually more on the consulting and advisory. And again, less integrated in the day-to-day, and certainly disconnected oftentimes from the leadership team at the.
Awesome. Sorry,
Andrew. Just a few quick points, Kelvin. One, for everybody listening, I just want to share, like, I've known Brian for years and years and years. This isn't like his thoughts. He's built, scaled, and sold a very successful vCISO company already. So, he's lived in it. He's been a CISO. So that's point number one. Point number two, I just want to say to the recurring revenue, non-recurring revenue, Kelvin, I like what you're saying. And, what I would say is, again, MSPs are unfortunately very much sometimes hammers when looking for nails, Kelvin. Yes. And what I mean by that is like, hey, these are our structured vCISO services. This is how we do things. And again, a lot of the research, the most recent research in sales shows that not only, and it's, by the way, I'm going to answer the question about influence in a minute by a LinkedIn user, more decision makers than ever, more people than ever are in decisions, right? I've literally spoken to multiple, we have a lot of MSPs at Right of Boom, right? But lots of MSPs, our advisory council, even minimal type decisions, Kelvin, 4, 5, 6 users involved. And, what the research shows is when people start to hesitate on a decision, and instead of what successful sellers do versus unsuccessful, and this is, I'm going to come into the influence. Unsuccessful always, like I said, go back to, hey, remember, you told me you can't, the status quo is no good. We've got all this risk. I'm going to keep hounding you on this. And then they go into this literally no decision mentality for fear of making a wrong decision. Instead, the best at this actually start to take risk off the table, Kelvin. They start to go, hey, instead of looking at this $50,000 engagement, why don't we go bear it down to this assessment? Let's bring the risk down. Let's get some small wins, et cetera, et cetera. And in my opinion, I'd like to ask this to you, Brian. How does one measure influence? I think are you part of the decision process? Yes. If there's 5 people in this decision, that you're now the 6th, and showing them how to make this decision, that again, from the research Brent Adamson shows, right? Decisions are something that we have to show, executive and leaders how to make one. Kelvin, when's the last time you saw one of your customers or prospects go, yeah, we're awesome. We absolutely know how to buy managed services, and we know how to, when it comes to XDR, we've done it so many times, we know exactly what we're looking for. Like, said no one.
It never happened. I wish that someday someone will knock on our door saying, like, we know exactly how to select our MSP, and we want this information from you because we're on our way to select one. And I wish that would happen. It would be so beautiful. Right. So, right, Brian, the influence comes when we're starting to show them how to make the decision, and they're taking like our recommendations. Look, let me show you how this decision is made for.
Yeah, this is an easy one for me. I always know when I've had the right influence on the organization, when it has zero to do with technology or security or anything at all. They call me up, hey, we're thinking about acquiring this company. We want your take. Hey, we got this contract from the customer, and there's some things in here that I want you to take a look at. Those are the kind of things where you really have influence and a different sort of strategic part and role within the organization, right? That to me is where, they're getting ready to sign a big client contract. They're going into a different product line. They're looking to be acquired, whatever those are, they want you in the room as part of that decision-making process. That to me, and it has to do with risk at the same time, because they want the risk lens. They want to see a different point of view or perspective that maybe they haven't thought about, right? Nobody likes surprises. And so especially executive leadership teams, they don't want surprises. So they want the people in the room that can help them see what those obstacles or friction point or potential gotchas are. They want that person in the room that has that perspective and brings that. That to me is where you're making a difference from an influence perspective.
Good stuff, Brian. Awesome.
So the workshop, the first day you have participants role-playing a conversation with a CFO. That's a cold plunge for most security people. What's the most common communication breakdown that will happen in that room?
It's usually it's over explaining, right? Because a lot of us over explaining technical jargon, like I said, spider diagrams, heat map. We talk too much about how the sausage is made, right? And again, we might as well be speaking a different language. And a lot of us have been trained to, and what I see in the room is we start to defend our position with technical depth, right? We start to go tech. I think, Andrew, you said hammer looking for a nail, right? That characterizes it perfectly. We go to what we're comfortable with, and that's our technical chops, right? Our engineering experience, our architecture experience, our tools, right? And we start to defend our decisions that way. And in reality, what the CFO are really fill in the blank on any sort of executives, they're looking for clarity, right? We need to explain these risks in like 3 sentences. And if you can't explain it in 2 or 3 sentences, then you don't know it well enough to lead it. So day one kind of forces that mindset change, to shorten language, get more word density, right? And sharpen it and remove the jargon. And also, Kelvin, I'll say that at least in the workshop, it can be a cold plunge, but what Andrew and I are trying to do here is we're trying to create a safe place to screw up and learn, right? So yes, I'm going to be the a-hole, role play the a-hole board member in the room that is always there, that thinks they know everything. I'm going to play the CFO focused on numbers. I'm going to play the CEO that says this is friction. I'll do the pushback, but we're in a safe place. But also, I said it earlier too, I won't repeat it in depth, but oftentimes we lack empathy and go in guns blazing with vulns and issues that we think are important, but we don't connect them right to the goals and objectives of the business. Remember, I can boil down every company and even business and nonprofits annual operating plans and strategic plans to 2 things. It's just glorified language around a lot of it, or ways SKOs and marketing people can feel good about it. They want to do 2 things this year. They want to increase revenue and they want to decrease costs. Every single business on the planet wants to do those 2 things. And if you're a nonprofit, you still need money, and a lot of it. You're either writing grants or getting donors or members or whatever it is so you can fulfill your mission, right? So those are the 2 things that you have to remember going into those kind of things. And the workshop really creates that tension, I think, intentionally, because if they can't handle the conversation in controlled room, you're not going to be able to handle it in an executive leadership meeting or a boardroom. I do have one canary in the coal mine question. I can quickly gain, and I can do this. I do this with a lot of folks that I mentor, but it's this one question that, and in the workshop we proactively prepare for this. But the answer to this one question, I can usually gauge kind of their credibility, right? Their experience in these kinds of things. And by day 3, they're really going to be prepared to proactively answer and respond to that question.
I love that. It's especially looking at, I recently had a little talk with some of my help desk, like I think 5 or 6 of them were sitting at the lunch table talking about like, how can we prepare for the future and how can we get beyond just being a help desk engineer and become a tier 2, tier 3, and etc. And I was talking to them and I said, the number one thing you have to do is you have to learn how to write, because you have to be able to convince the person that you're talking to about what that you're capable enough to fix their problem. And once you learn that, you learn how to write about technical issues. And what you're saying is exactly the same, except they don't need to just learn how to write. They need to learn how to talk to people in more understandable things. So I absolutely love that, which actually leads me straight into my last question. Every engineer is filled with bad habits. Every engineer is. I mean, I am technical myself. I have many of them that I know either are seen as too tactical instead of strategic, or are seen as, oh, that's an engineering mindset. But what is one technical habit that is the hardest to unlearn?
Yeah, it's and I shared a little bit about this, but it's gravitating towards what's comfortable, and that is generally going into over explaining the technical or jumping to FUD. I mean, the one question that I can usually tell what the habits are is I'll just answer the question. I'll say, "Hey, pitch me," and I'll say, hey, that sounds like a 2027 problem, right? That's not a yes. That's not a no. That's me kicking the can. So how do you react to that? Because it's high risk, right? It's something that I need to spend that money on that, but you can't convince me I need to do it right now. And that's the tricky part. And a lot of us jump to fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Well, if you don't do it, if you don't implement MFA, the boogeyman's going to get us. And the average cost of a breach is $5 million and blah, 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 blah. Nothing in context that the business can relate to. So we skew too technical. And like the old way is like, hey, we have a critical RCE vulnerability in our externally exposed web application stack, and the CVSS score is 9.8, and lateral movement could impact multiple segmented environments. I need $80,000 to fix it, or the boogeyman is going to take us down, right? And in the 3 days, what we hope by day 3 is it's more like, instead of all of that technical stuff that executive team not going to know what the hell you're talking about, is you can reword it, right? Maybe something like a flaw in our customer portal could allow an attacker to shut down online ordering for several days. That system drives about a third of our revenue. We either fix it now for 80 grand or we accept the financial exposure, right? That's a different conversation. Still got an RCE problem I got to fix, right? And some of that. I still need $80,000, but I said it two completely different ways. And one was likely get lean in and more questions, and the other would obviously get a CEO start scrolling his phone.
Halfway through the sentence, he would have been zoned out. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Okay. I think Bob still has some questions, right?
Oh, yeah. got a few. So what we're going to do, Brian, is we're going to go to DEFCON orange here, right? So I'm going to combine a couple things into two, so that we can get a couple to give you some time to give at least a solid answer, but a brief one, because I want to make sure and give Phyllis some time, because she's got some great questions on the end of this. So, all right, so here we go. Day 2, you introduced the concept of using frameworks like NIST, ISO, CIS for these organizations. So we're going to, I want you to at least talk about, because you warn them not to just mechanically implement these things. You don't just check the box and mechanically implement these things. So, a really short description of why that's dangerous for people to just mechanically do those. And then the second part of this, which I think it does actually kind of play into it, is that when you do the lunch the second day, you start talking about, how stakeholders really perceive risk differently. So talk about which one of the positions that people play in their organization sort of surprises people the most when they start talking about security. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. So two questions, both very different. So I'll start with the first one first. But I think, especially I think you said the mechanical implementation, and I use the word checkbox theater or something like that. And I think that's a great way to characterize it, right? Advisory theater, very dangerous and is pervasive, because what it does is it does this without practical or pragmatic security. I was at a SKO. I'll keep this real brief. I was at a SKO for a company that was on year 3 going into 4 of having a ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2 attestation, all that kind of stuff. So some level of compliance maturity, right? So I asked him, there were a lot of people in the room, right? I said, everybody raise your hand if you can tell me where your security policies are at. Nobody could tell me where I would find. Are they in SharePoint? Are they somewhere else? Are they printed out? What? Nobody could do that, and so, they can't pick, because my next question was well, pick a policy, tell me about your role in it, but they couldn't even answer kind of where they're at. So I did a little digging, and a couple months prior to that, they all acknowledged 41 security policies, right? They all got them and acknowledged them. So all green lights, man. Green is good in our business. So all green lights in their compliance readiness platform. They're checking the boxes in ISO and SOC 2, but nobody understands some of the core rules of the road around information security and cybersecurity. And that, to me, that's criminal, right? Our policies are some of the most important things we have, right? And so you end up with a beautifully mapped controls and all green, but it costs speed, it costs adaptability, and it creates a false sense of confidence. So that's the first part. The second part, I think, when I look back at my career on risk and different stakeholders' perceptions of risk, legal is kind of what always early in my career, I thought, oh gosh, I got to go meet chief legal counsel, and they're going to want like zero risk, right? They're going to want to eliminate risk. But man, legal is your best friend. They are really good at managing risk, right? Not eliminating it. And I think that's probably the stakeholder that surprised at least me more than anybody is you think total lockdown, absolute control, but legal understands, again, risk better than a lot of us do. And what they're really wanting is defensibility. Yes. They want to know, if our decision's challenged in court or by regulators or by customers, can we demonstrate that we were reasonable, that we exercised due care, we made informed decisions, right? Finance is different. Finance doesn't want zero risk either, but they want predictability. They don't want to be caught off guard and surprises. Operations, continuity, right? And stability, right? Pain. Downtime is pain, and friction is pain. And CEOs generally, especially growth companies, 100% focus on velocity, right? They're balancing opportunity cost against drag every day, right? So if securities don't understand those lenses, they default again to arguing about controls and frameworks. And when they do understand that, they understand the lens in which to kind of cast
for the last question dialogue. I got. So you're doing a live tabletop simulation, which, by the way, is dear to my heart, obviously, right? So you're doing a live tabletop exercise, and you're going to be playing the CISO as a part of this unfolding incident. So what's and I definitely have what I think the flaw is that I see the most, but I'm curious, what's the leadership flaw that surfaces the most when you're consistently putting these people under pressure?
Yeah, well, and this is one I would put back on you real quick. What do you see in the leadership role? In IR games and some of the other stuff you've done. What
I can tell you the thing they fail the most on is the communication process, both internally and externally. They have absolutely no idea what the hell to say internally and externally. They barely have when they get engaged, they're leaning on the technical people, not realizing that 80% of an incident is not technical. It's all the other stuff that goes on. So they get themselves in trouble consistently from a communication standpoint, how to develop the right language internally to get everybody focused and on the right playing field. And then externally, and that's, by the way, because usually they wind up taking the role of coordinator, which that may or may not be suited for, but right. That's usually the first really bad decision. But then after that, it goes right in the dump because of the communication part.
Yeah, your primary job as CISO is not containment, right? It's confidence management. It's being kind of the calm in the storm. And these are emotional events, right? Most of the time you're managing egos and managing personalities and just trying to calm the storm. And you're stabilizing the executive team while the technical teams can focus and do their thing, right? And that distinction is rarely trained. And so that's the focus that we're going to take and try to train that in that 3-day workshop. But it does take practice. I mean, everybody thinks breach, the CISO changes into a Superman outfit and he's there to save the day and do everything. And it just delegation decisions.
Yeah, and if they've never been through it, they just don't have the emotional attachment to understand how it really is going to go, right? So I agree with you there. So I'm going to turn over to Phyllis. Phyllis, there you go.
Hey, thanks. So Brian, MSPs are sitting in an uncomfortable position right now. They're trusted by their small, medium clients. they're, as the security authority, but most of them really haven't operationalized anything close to what you're teaching in the workshop. And so how big do you think that gap really is? And who gets hurt first when it doesn't close well?
Well, I don't know. Who said MSPs are trusted by their SMB client?
Oh, wow. Well, there you go.
I think that's a bit of, I would challenge that statement, perhaps. And I think that's a big part of the problem. Our MSPs clients are educated consumers, right? This isn't 1999 or 2005 anymore. They've been burnt a lot in the past. They ask really good questions. And I think, the bigger spot here is how are MSPs going to show up and lead their clients? All the MSPs I've had that I built, grown, sold, and exited, in the last several, I did marketing outreaches. MSP clients are starving for leadership. And I mean, put security leadership and all that. They are starving for leadership and helping them, not just with uptime, but business enablement. How do we do stuff faster? How do we get more efficient? How do we increase revenue and decrease costs? Remember, that's what all our clients want to do. And they're looking for leadership, not order takers. And so a lot of MSPs, you talk to them and their smile backs and all that are real good. Hey, yeah, they answer the phone when we call and they respond to tickets when we send a ticket in. But this big leadership gap, think of how much you could sell on your MSP if you were integrated in with your client and really knew their business a little bit better and could speak in a context and a language they understand about helping them move forward faster, right? That's what a good IT program and MSP should do. You should help your clients move forward faster. The security part of that is helping your clients move forward faster with confidence, right? That's the vCIO and vCISO difference. So those are some of the, Phyllis, some of the things that we're going to teach is how to communicate at that level, how to dig in and understand what a critical business function is and tie some of the IT stuff we do to that and get our agenda and help our clients.
That's awesome. So let's say, I'm an MSP, I took the workshop, I'm ready to go, I'm going to go have my meeting. And then the CEO is like, what? Maybe the CEO says, what is it? Let me think about that. Or
yeah, you're giving us a lot to think about.
Which I think is hilarious because I've heard that plenty of time when I was in government.
Oh, I have too. I still hear it every now and then.
So now what? Like, do I keep on pushing? Do I have to adapt more? Do I just walk out the door? I mean, obviously you're not there to hear everything, but
No, it's a great question, right? And at first I take it emotionally and think, wow, we failed our mission, right? But that's not true. And you're going to have that, right? Where if someone leaves the workshop, they go back to implement some of the stuff we talked about, and the CEO still thinks security is like an IT problem. My honest advice, first, reflect on yourself, right? Adapt your language, ask the CEO, hey, this fell a little flat. This doesn't seem like we're talking effectively. Is there a better way that we can talk about this? And push strategically, right? Think about translating the risk into revenue impact, operational continuity, right? Their language, regulatory consequences, sometimes depending upon the executive. Most of the time, CEO thinks security is an IT issue simply because no one's ever really, I think, framed it differently. Right. And the other thing I would say is influence takes time, right? It's built on trust. And so influence and leading that way requires some patience. And if after you've elevated your language and aligned to business priorities and demonstrated like strategic value, you're still treated like overhead, then you don't really have a security maturity problem. You might have a leadership alignment issue, right? At some point, serious leaders choose environments that are serious about risk, and leadership is about influence and alignment and impact. And that's what we're trying to do with the workshop. Day one, by the end of day one, you stop thinking like a technician, right? And start protecting technology. And you stop thinking like a technician protecting technology, and you start thinking like an executive protecting the business. End of day two, you stop managing security activities and tasks, and start leading defensible, measurable security program that executives trust and fund and rely on. And by the end of day 3, you stop being a security leader who supports executives and start becoming a trusted executive voice who influences things like strategy and funding, governance, and the future of the company. So this isn't about adding a bunch more tools to your toolkit. It's about elevating the way you show up in the rooms where decisions are made. If you want a seat at the table and the ability to hold it under pressure, that's what we're building at Cyber Bay. And I'd love to see all you serious leaders in that room.
I have a quick follow-up. I know we're out of time, but you know, I see this as like a series of meetings versus one and done. So I just want to set expectations for folks, like how much should I invest before I walk away? What is it that, you know, I hear all the time from MSPs, you know, because they're just trying to make ends meet perhaps. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, iterate, right? When you're talking to someone, you know when they lean in and get to know them, right? You get to know them on an emotional level, then you can really quickly tie, hey, when we talked, you said you didn't want to pick up the phone to take those clients out of your rotation. Well, I've got a way that we can do that by adding resiliency, and here's what we can do so you don't have to make that phone call, right? And so it's connecting with people, and this is tough for us introverts, right? It's we've got to talk to people and we've got to have meaningful conversations and soft skills. It just takes practice and repetition.
And I think the same thing for the actual, you know, learning that what we're teaching, Phyllis. That's why there's an ongoing monthly cohort. Like this is not a one and done.
Good.
We'll continue to bring in experts each month. So there's ongoing CPEs. We don't want this to just be, hey, I got this credential. This has to be a relevant thing that, let's just say Kelvin and team go to, that they have a CCLS credential, but there's this actual ongoing reason that they're differentiating themselves and separating themselves from.
That's great. So like I had my meeting, this is what happened. Can you please tell me, coach me, or do I walk away? Please help me. Okay, that's awesome.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Phyllis. Yeah, that's exactly the time where you say, hey, let's role play this. This is what happened. And then maybe get some good ideas to go
for sure.
Awesome.
Well, Kelvin, as always, thanks for coming in late at night. I really appreciate it.
Evening, but it's okay. Okay.
I appreciate it, dude. And you just had another major release, did you not? I know I'm going to ask. Where did this push you to in terms of MSP?
The current release was really focused more on Intune management.
Okay. So we are very happy.
Allowing applications and that kind of stuff. So it's less security, more generic management.
Got it. So Lior's very happy.
Yes, Lior's very happy.
Okay, fantastic. Bob, thanks for joining us and filling in. Phyllis, thanks a million. Brian, congrats again. Great job. And if you're coming, and we have some amazing MSPs joining us in a week and a half, we look forward to seeing you in Tampa on the 11th. So until then, take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.